Okay, everyone, so we're going to keep learning about the respiratory system. And we are looking at topic 9, part 2. Yes, lecture 2. All right. So we finished off looking at the upper respiratory system, and now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the lower respiratory system, and we're going to start looking at the trachea. Here we go. As you can see, it's just a tube made out of cartilage and some connective tissue, and also you'll see later some muscle. And it actually, with the spot where the trachea divides into two, is called the carina. Okay, so the trachea is a long tube, your windpipe. When it divides into two, it's called the carina. So there's a lot of divisions, and yeah, so we're going to have a look at those. And if you have a look at the trachea, you'll see it's got cartilage, hyaline cartilage, C-shaped rings. Now, that's just to make sure that the trachea stays open. Here is the esophagus sitting behind it. And there's also a little muscle here called the trachealis muscle, and that helps you bring things up or cough if you need to, get things out of there. And the wall, so there's a lot of tissue going on here. So what you see here, this is the inside of the trachea. You've got some mucosa, you've got ciliated pseudostratified columbia epithelium. So you should know what that is, because we looked at tissues and we looked at epithelial tissue. And goblet cells make mucus. Then sitting on top of that, we have some connective tissue. And then after that, we have some cartilage. Yeah. So, yeah, that's where we're at. So let's have a look at the lungs. We have two lungs, left and right. There are three parts to your right lung, 1, 2, 3, and two lobes of your left lung. Okay. Just showing you a schematic, a diagram now of where we're at with things. So this is more of a schematic of the delivery of the actual air. So we've got your nose here, and you've got your oral cavity here, and so air can flow through this particular area. And this way to the stomach, so this would be the esophagus, and then this would be your trachea. And your trachea is going to divide at the carina. And so it goes down the right side and the left side. When your trachea divides, the left side is narrower and less steep than the right side. Okay, so if someone inhales something that they shouldn't inhale, chances are it will end up on the right side. Okay, so we had a look at the trachea, and now we're going to have a look at the bronchial tree. So all of the blue squares are going to be the bronchial tree. Here we go. Here's your trachea. And it divides up into, so now we're dividing like an inverse tree. A tree upside down. You've got your primary bronchi, one to each lung. Secondary bronchi is going to each lobe. Then now we're going to divide again. So how many secondary bronchi would you have? You would have 3 on the right side, and you have 2 on the left side, 1 for each lobe. Then you've got tertiary bronchi, okay? And then you've got terminal bronchioles. Here is another picture. Trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary, and then bronchioles. So when we get to the bronchiole, okay, this one is called the terminal bronchiole. And then you've got, after that, you've got the respiratory bronchiole. Okay, so you go primary, secondary, tertiary, terminal, then respiratory. And then we keep going. Alveolar duct, alveolar sac, and then alveoli. So the alveolar sac is just like a bunch of grapes, and each grape is an alveoli. Just so you know, each individual grape. Okay, so as you can see here, it just keeps dividing and dividing and dividing. This gives you a bit of a good picture about, you know, this part of the airway is just there to deliver the air, where this part of the airway is going to be, this part is going to be involved in gas exchange, and it just gives you a bit of an idea of things like, you know, how many branches there are and the surface area and things like that. Right, so what I want you to understand is that there is a part of the airway designed just to deliver the air, and there's also a part of the airway designed for gas exchange. And what you need to understand too is that the epithelium tissue changes as you go all the way down. Goblet cells are cells that make mucus. Look, they start to taper off. Don't worry too much about club cells. Cartilage, look, by the time we get to this end, we don't have any more cartilage. Look at smooth muscle. We have smooth muscle right near towards the end, and we have elastic fibers. So your lungs expand, but they also have elastin, so they have to come back. All right, so let's have a look at one grape, so one alveoli. What is in here? Lots of things. We have something called the respiratory membrane. Now that is crucial. That is a really important structure, okay? Because that is the alveolar cell, okay? So the cell that makes the alveoli, which is a squamous epithelial cell. We have a little basement membrane, and then we have the cell that makes up the capillary. So that is a very, very crucial membrane, because that's where gas exchange is going to happen. We also have cells in here that make something called surfactant. This guy here is a macrophage. I think it's this guy here. I'm not sure which one. I think this blue guy is a macrophage, which essentially he goes around just picking up debris or things that really shouldn't be in there, just comes up and gobbles things up that really shouldn't be there, just cleans up all the time. And then one of the cells here, I think that maybe this one is the one that makes the surfactant, which is this stuff here that sits on top of the squamous alveolar cell. Now, that surfactant is important because it stops our alveoli from collapsing. We're going to look at surfactant later. Okay, now we're going to look at the layers of, or the serous membrane of covering our lungs. You have the visceral pleura, which is the side of the double layered membrane stuck closest to the lung, and then the parietal, which is the stuff, the side of the membrane furthest away, and then you've got the pleural space, which is filled with fluid. Okay, now it says here that the pleura are not connected but stick to each other. Okay, so there's surface tension because there's fluid, and water always likes to stick with other water molecules because it kind of keeps it all together. If you don't know, pneumothorax is when your lung has collapsed, because what's happened is that you've gotten air in here. So that's not good. You've got air in there, and so it's going to change all of these pressures here, and it's going to collapse your lung. And this pleural space can also be infected with bacteria. So you can, it should be just fluid in there, and that fluid should be sterile, and you can't puncture it, and you shouldn't have anything growing in it. Okay, so I think that you need to print this page out, cut out all the bits, and use it as a puzzle with your friends and family. Yay!